today, Saturday morning. I'm Lisa. I think everybody knows me. And at our planning meeting in February, we felt we wanted to take a look at redistricting and see what our role would be in helping define and set up the districts that are upcoming. And in order to do so, we need some initial information about it. And Chris offered to talk to us about redistricting and the importance and so forth. Some of the background, we do know that they have set up the redistricting committees in the area, in our Santa Barbara area. And we have 2 folks representing the 4th district and the 5th district. And they have started meetings twice a month in order to set some groundwork, because a lot of the information is going to be based on the census when the census information comes out later this year. So we want to get a head start on what we need to do before all the activity kicks in once we get information around the census. So Chris Carson has offered to help us out with this and give us a overview, and as it says, why it's important, which I know I will benefit from. So Chris, good morning, and I'll turn it over to you.
Okay. First, I'm just going to go through the basics, because things like the criteria apply pretty much no matter what level of redistricting you're talking about. And then I'll talk about local redistricting, and I'll focus on the city of Santa Maria as an example. Before I get started, you were talking about districts. Did you mean the county supervisorial districts or your city districts? When you were you had representatives.
It's the county, I believe.
County, okay, because you've got city. Well, we'll get there when we get there. I just needed to get that clarified. Okay, so why is it important? Because we need political districts. They're election districts, legislative districts, voting districts, whatever you want to call them. They're a smaller part of the city or a county or a region or state. And they're created to make sure the people who live there can vote for candidates who represent them on whatever body, like school board or council or state legislature or Congress. So the US Constitution requires that political districts have the same number of residents. It's called population equality. And the phrase we know, one person, one vote. And the goal is to make sure, it's mandated by the United States Constitution. It's very clear. The goal is to make sure that each member of the Congress, for instance, represents the same number of people across the country. Now, it's not absolute. It is not literally one, totally equal population. There is leeway allowed for, say, for instance, the Federal Voting Rights Act, but not that much. You can only go so far in terms of having more or less equality within a district, which is true at all levels of government, whatever you're talking about, Congress, legislature, or local. So let's take a look at it. You've got 4 districts with 5 people, so each elected representatives represents equal number of people. And that's to understand that when the districts include all residents, not just voters. So everybody in the district is counted, we hope, with the census. But as you know, over time, things change. What was a completely equal population starts to migrate. The example I will talk about, I can give you is Southern California, where more and more people have moved out of Los Angeles County and moved to San Bernardino and Riverside County, the Inland Empire, because of housing prices. And I think I've been told that's true up your way, that you've got people moving, more people living up in Santa Maria area because the housing prices used to be at least lower. And so the numbers change. And so now some of the districts have more people than other districts. So every year, every 10 years, the federal government counts everybody in the country, not just citizens or voters. And it provides a snapshot of who we are, the data, who we are and where we are for the next decade. And so then after the census finishes, you got to redraw the districts to even out the size, the population. So in California, the boundaries are drawn for Congress, the state legislature, and hundreds of boards of supervisors, city councils, school boards, and everything else. So in this slide, you've got the old district. In this slide, you've got the black lines represent the new districts because they've been withdrawn to assure that there are equal number of people in each. So now you got 6 people in each district. Sounds very simple. So if it sounds simple, why is it not simple? Why does it matter? Redrawing the boundaries of political districts, redistricting, can affect the balance of power at Congress, the state legislature. It affects power between political parties, geographic regions, ethnic, racial groups, and special interests. It can also affect whether elections are competitive and have more than 1 or 2 candidates. Now, the League does not support competitiveness as a requirement when drawing districts. But when you draw them fairly, sometimes you get more people running as a result. It's important to remember, though, that competitiveness is not one of the rules for redistricting in California. So you're going to hear people talk about it. It's not one of the criteria the Citizens Redistricting Commission uses when they draw the state and federal districts. So more political power. So it's in here. So this district, you got 2/3 Whig and 1/3 Tory. This would be considered a really safe Whig district because there's no competition and it's highly unlikely that a Tory could win. However, if you change the way you draw it, you've got 1/2 Whig and 1/2 Tory. And this would be a toss-up or what we call a swing district, meaning the elections in the district would be more of a contest. And whoever won would have to pay attention to her constituents, not just the ones who told her what she wanted to hear. And why this all is important, because this stuff lasts for a decade at a time. Once those boundaries are drawn, they're in place for 10 years. Because of this, the effect of redistricting is profound, more than any single election or event, because the entity that controls the drawing controls who gets elected for the next 10 years, at least. And then if you go on and you don't have an independent redistricting, you can control it indefinitely. So it's a matter of whose voices are heard. In this district, you've got minorities in about a 1/4 of each district. And we call this cracking. I'm sure you've heard the term. And it refers to when you fragment concentrations of minority populations among multiple districts to assure they have no voice in any one district. If a community, which could be 60% of one district, is split so that it's 20% of 4 districts, you've cracked it. The chances are that the communities will not have much of a say in any elections in these districts, and equal chance that none of the elected representatives from these districts will hear the needs and viewpoints of communities of color because they don't need their votes. So they can just literally ignore them. The best example I can think of in Southern California was the 2001 redistricting of Koreatown, where it was split into 5 separate districts, thereby making it impossible for the people in Koreatown to speak to any even 2 representatives with any degree of clout. It was one of the things that drove, one of the most outrageous examples that drove the reform. So so you've got here minorities are, in some districts, but their views are very different one from another. People with racial and ethnic differences often have viewpoints on candidates which are going to differ from other people. The way that you draw those maps impacts whether voters with these differences have the voting power to elect candidates of their choice, or at least influence the outcome of elections. You may be like 35 or 40%, but the candidate can't afford to ignore you, and therefore you have some influence. So here you've got a quarter in each, and but if you do it another way, minorities can make up 3/4 in one district. Chances are they're going to have significant influence on the elections in the district. They're also in a much stronger position to advocate with their elected representatives. It's just, basic power. Whose voices are heard? So this is another way. What you see here, the minority population has been packed into a single district. Again, diminishing their ability to have a fully representative voice. Packing isn't like cracking. It refers to concentrating as many people as possible from a minority group into as few districts as possible. So, it limits the total number of districts in which they have influence. For example, if you've got a community could be 55% of 2 different districts, but you pack them into one, such that they're like 80% of a district and 15% of another, you've packed. Because you've made sure that they have the opportunity to elect one representative, but only one. The best example I can think of is North Carolina. A few years back, the League of Women Voters of North Carolina, and the National League went all the way to the Supreme Court with this one and won. In 2001, the legislature drew the lines, and there were 2 districts in North Carolina. One was majority Black, and they elected a Black candidate. In the neighboring district, the Black population was like 40% of the population, but the Black candidates were able to attract enough white votes, and so they elected a second Black member of Congress. Well, the North Carolina legislature wasn't going to put up with that. So the next time they drew the lines, they packed one congressional district with Black voters, claiming that they had to do that to honor the Voting Rights Act. And so they pulled them out of enough out of the other districts so that they had no chance to elect a Black candidate. The League in North Carolina went all the way to the Supreme Court, and we won. The court ruled this was a classic example of racial cracking, racial packing, racial gerrymandering. And so that's an example of what happens when you do that kind of thing. So it does matter who draws the lines. The reality of life is that elected officials can have different goals drawing the districts. They're interested in getting reelected, which is human nature, or seeing someone whom they prefer be elected. It's just a statement. It's not a criticism. An example of this would be, again, it was one of the examples that drove reform. In 2001, a small farming town in the Western Central Valley was added to a coastal district in order to protect the incumbent office holder from another candidate within his own party who was a real threat to his reelection. And it worked. The candidate had no opportunity to beat him in the primary. And not only did it work for him, but when he was termed out, it worked for his hand-picked successor. So let's just quickly look at California. Before 2010, the California legislature drew these districts. It was controlled by the leadership of the state Senate and Assembly, and they either gerrymandered in favor of one party or they protected incumbent office holders, whoever they were. There were very few rules, and so politicians literally chose the voters they wanted to get themselves reelected. So after a real good campaign, passing Prop 11 and 20, that was changed. We have a completely independent redistricting commission. They're made of 14 California voters, got plenty of public hearings, get input via email, online, letters, and they draw districts. First map, get more hearings, more thing, and then the maps are complete. They do all their work, including drawing the lines in public. And you can watch all of the hearings online and provide live feedback. California's first Citizens Redistricting Commission was successful in drawing all 4 sets of maps. The results were maps that were better and represented a wider range of communities. It wasn't perfect, there were some legitimate concerns, but dramatically better than when the legislature was in charge. And so now the 2020 Commission is at it again. So how it works. The census data is released. We all know the census data, it's still rather chaotic. So they take the census data whenever it gets here and use it. And in California, one extra step is that allows people in state prisons to be included in communities from which they came. So they're counted with their homes rather than in the area with the prison. That's going to have a dramatic impact in some areas in terms of population. So the commission is about to begin public hearings on input, but we still don't know exactly what the timeline will be because nobody's really quite sure. But you can start public input before we get the data. And people are already giving feedback to the state commission. So anyway, that's how it happens. This is how, these are their criteria, and this is really important to know. They are required to use these criteria in ranked order, meaning first, second, third choice. So obviously you've got to have equal population. You have to follow the Federal Voting Rights Act. Districts have got to be contiguous. That means you can't have half of a district in one part of the state and half in the other. And this is true for any level of redistricting. You've got to have, no matter where you are, whether it's the congressional districts or a mosquito abatement district, you've got to have equal population. You have to honor the Voting Rights Act. It's got to be contiguous. You've got to respect, in the case of the state, city and county boundary lines and preserve communities of interest, depending upon the situation. Obviously, in a large metropolitan area, when you're drawing state and federal maps, you can't keep Los Angeles, city of Los Angeles intact, or any large metropolitan area. You can't. So you look equally at neighborhoods or communities of interest to make your choices. And they've got to be geographically compact, meaning in California, at least, you can't draw a district that stretches way for miles on the east and leaves out a large chunk of population that's slightly west of you. Can't do that here. That's a great tactic in gerrymandering, but can't do that here. So let's talk just a bit about communities of interest. Communities of interest are really, really important. The California Constitution defines them this way. Community of interest is a contiguous population which shares common social and economic interests that should be included within a single district for purposes of its effective and fair representation. That's very vague, and I was one of the people who wrote it, and it was deliberately vague because we didn't want to put in the definition of community interest that made sense in 2008, but which would be totally outdated within 10 or 20 years, let alone 40 or 50 years. So it could be residents who live near each other and share common interests. Safety, transit, health conditions, environmental conditions, faith-based, churches, mosques, temples, shopping centers. I kid you not, in the last redistricting round in Riverside, at the end of the day, what they used, the commission used as one of the determinants for Riverside is where there were two Costco's, one to the east and one to the west. It turned out that everybody west of a certain thing went to one Costco, and everybody east went to the other Costco. And when they dug down, it represented real shared economic, social, and political cohesion of the group that went to west, which was very different from the group that went to the eastern Costco. So that's that's how it can be done. So how do you do all this? We're going to talk about that a little later. So let's go on to the local. It's not just the big stuff. Lots of people just pay attention to the state commission. Local redistricting is very important because, as we know, at the local level, it's where you have the greatest impact on government and can influence policy. So we really need to pay attention to these kinds of redistrictings. So it means drawing maps for these levels of government. If you live in an area that has single member districts, so like Santa Barbara has single member supervisorial districts. City of Santa Maria has 4 single member districts and an at-large mayor. If your school board has districts, if your park, or if you have a park, or I'm not joking about mosquito abatement and fire, these districts exist in California. If they have districts, they have to redraw the district lines every 10 years. And until recently, most of these maps were drawn by elected officials. Still do in a lot of cases, with very few rules beyond the Brown Act, which required open public meetings. Some local districts have redistricting commissions, and some have appointed commissions, but most are, like Santa Maria, are drawn by the incumbents. But they can't do quite what they did before. These are the new laws which apply to, you have look at the city of Santa Maria. It is a general law city, which means they don't have their own charter, so they have to conform to state law. They draw their own lines, but these are the laws that they have to follow now. You've got to have population equality adjusted for incarcerated people. And at this local level, I guess what Santa Barbara maybe would do, the county, is to the people in county jail, where do they come from in the county? Not where they're in the prison, the county jail, but where did they originally come from in Santa Barbara County? You all have to comply with the Federal Voting Rights Act, 1965. Got to be contiguous. You've got to respect the geographical integrity of any local neighborhood or community of interest. So in Santa Barbara County or in Santa Maria, that would mean you have to take into consideration that if they're small cities within the county, you have to really, really work hard to keep those cities intact. If you've got a local neighborhood, within cities, or in case of Santa Maria, a local neighborhood or a community of interest, you have to work really hard to keep them intact. For instance, in the city of Santa Maria, if you have historic districts or neighborhood councils or designated neighborhoods, like the generally accepted, I've used the example in Los Angeles, say like we have Little Ethiopia or Little Armenia or historic Filipino town, or we have like neighborhoods that the city has said, we're calling this neighborhood Toluca Woods. Okay, that's a neighborhood and it's defined, and so you have to pay attention to that. But aside from that, if you're speaking about your neighborhood or community of interest in Santa Maria, you would say we are this community of interest and this is where we live, and you describe it and say why you're a community of interest. And as you see, where possible, use natural and artificial, so, if you've got a large, a large canyon, I'm thinking of San Diego, right? It's a very large, sprawling, physically, like Los Angeles. You've got a large canyon in the middle. Would you maybe think that might be a natural boundary line for a district? Maybe, maybe not, but that kind of thing. Do you have foothills right in the middle of it? What about a freeway or an interstate or state? There are, that can be about, depending on the situation, that could be a useful boundary. And to the extent practical, you got to have them compact. You can't have them sprawling out all over everywhere, just to make it easier to get reelected. And this is new. For the first time, no favoring or discriminating against a political party at the local level. Now, we all know that in California, they're nonpartisan offices, but we also know that the political affiliation of the people running. It is not unheard of that when a redistricting is done, if there's a majority of a certain party on the council or say the county board, that they draw lines which make sure that that party's candidates really do get elected for the next 10 years. And the other really important thing, and this applies to both Santa Barbara County, but certainly to Santa Maria, they now have public outreach requirements and public hearing requiremwas. It used to be that, say, any city council, I'm not picking on Santa Maria, but say a city council was redrawing their lines. All they had to do was post a notice on the interior wall of an office, Brown Act, 72 hours. At the next council meeting, we're going to redraw the lines and do it. And it's perfectly legal. It's not legal now. So your city council would have to you have to have at least 4 public hearings noticed at least 72 hours before each public hearing, so that you can't just turn up on a Tuesday night and redraw the districts. They also have public outreach requirements. They're required to have a website that is dedicated to redistricting in your city. They're required to hold these public hearings. You're required to provide reasonable language access depending upon the needs of the people in the city. And so this is what Santa Maria will have to do later on. The interesting thing is that we found already, the leagues are very much involved in local redistricting. We found that the cities are saying, the law says 4 public hearings. So that's what we're going to have, 4 public hearings, not anything else. That's all we have. That's what we have. That's what the law says we must do. That's not true. It's a minimum. So we have leagues across the state saying, no, you have to do more than the minimum. You need to have as many public outreach hearings to get people's, comments as is possible. And a number of them are. Certainly the state commission is doing it. I know that in Los Angeles, it's an appointed commission, but still they are already planning to do multiple public hearings to get people's input. So one of the things that, as you're thinking about Santa Maria, when I went to the website and I didn't see anything about redistricting on the Santa Maria City website. I did a search using redistricting and redistricting terms, seeing if it was buried somewhere, because that's a great trick of burying it. I couldn't find anything. If it's there, I would love to know. But soon, the City Council of Santa Maria is going to have to start working on this. They're going to have to, set up a website, a minimum website. They are going to have to hold at least 3 public hearings up to get input from people about their neighborhoods and communities of interest before they draw the maps. And once they get the maps, then they have to have another public hearing in order to get people's feedback. I don't like this. You should have done that. And before they do their final maps and post them. So that has to be done. And so if you're looking for like, what can we do? I think your question would start with, when are you going to get started? When are you going to put up a website? When are you going to start public outreach to get community input? And how many languages will you need? And they will have to provide sign and closed caption when they're doing it for that. And many leagues are advocating, say, okay, yes, great. 70 Brown Act, 72 hours, but we want it. You need more. We need more time, because if you announce on a Friday evening at 5 p.m. that you're going to hold public outreach hearing on Monday night or Tuesday morning, that's not enough time for people to be aware of it, to get their act together, to create a statement about, this is my neighborhood or my community of interest. It's, it's bordered on the north by this street, on the east by that street, on the, and why we are a community of interest takes more than that amount of time. Now, while it's true that they don't have to do that, leagues across California are pushing quite hard on city councils and school boards and everything else for more than the minimum 72 hours notice. One of the most fascinating dodges early on that we ran into with Los Angeles County, which has a new independent redistricting commission. Before the commission got fully seated and intact and ready, got their power, the notice was posted on like the 4th floor in the office of the Board of Supervisors. All right, well, we're in the middle of a pandemic. How many people are going to travel down to downtown Los Angeles to the Hall of Administration in the middle of a pandemic and know that you're going to go up to the 4th floor in an interior office to see the public notice? That doesn't work. So the public notice has got to be up on the website, and we advocate for more than 72 hours. So that's city, and I'll be happy to take questions later, but I just want to talk about education districts, K-12 and community college. There are very few rules for these bodies, because in the legislative push to get that new law, we couldn't put them in there. It was not possible. They have to abide by the Brown Act, but they don't have to have a minimum number of public outreach hearings. They do have to abide by some things like equal population, Voting Rights Act, contiguous, that type of thing. They can gerrymander. They can cut up communities to make sure that they get themselves reelected. They can literally do what they do is to put up a physical notice on somewhere in the building that 72 hours from now, the school board or the college board will be redrawing the lines. And there it is. So if you're interested in some local leagues are for internal matters, they're focusing on like a school district. And their push is best practices. Yeah, you don't have to, but this is what you should be doing. And really calling them out publicly. One school district up north said, well, we just went to districts last year, so we don't have to redraw the districts. Well, that's nonsense. The data was from 10 years ago. So you've got to go through and see where people are. And even if people haven't moved around that much and you don't need to redraw the lines, you still have to certify that the districts in place comply with the basic rules. So that's what, if you are interested, and some are, this is what you do. Same thing is true of other special districts. Water, parks, whatever. An example of a league up north, they had a park board that had districts. Funny thing was that when money was allocated for new parks, it was always in certain districts and not in others. They never could find money to build new parks in certain districts. Also, could never find money to maintain the parks in some districts, but lots of money to improve the parks in other districts. Became a huge bone of contention, and in this last election, trouble happened, and they got a lot of people lost their seats, and there was huge uproar. But that's the kind of thing you might think, oh, a park district. Well, depending on what the situation is, it might be. I have no idea about, in your area, but I'm just raising it as what it is. So let's look at Santa Maria. What could your goals be if you decide to look at the Santa Maria City Council redistricting? Well, transparency. You want a website. You've got to have a website. You have to have sufficient public notice. You have to have the hearings, the meetings of just as they are being Zoomed, live streamed for council meetings, those meetings should be Zoomed. The state league is the state commission, televised absolutely every single meeting they have. Commissions around the state, the local commissions, they live stream broadcast every single meeting the commission has. You need to be asking for that. Public participation. So that's where you really, really try to participate yourselves, to engage with your partners, neighbors, to get people to understand how important it is to be participating at the city level. And so that's using your existing networks and trying to build new ones. Holding meetings, Zoomed, of course, where you talk about how you prepare to tell the council what your neighborhood of community of interest is, and there are lots of resources. I'm not going to hit you with them now, but I can send you links to really simple resources to train people how to go to the council and say, this is my neighborhood, and here's what it is, and and do it. And fair maps. We want to keep communities whole. In the case of Santa Barbara County or the city of Santa Maria, you would want to keep like communities whole, not have them cut up in order to favor incumbents, and to push for best practices. Even if you don't have to follow the new laws, you should do so. And if you don't do so, we're going to call you out publicly. Those are our goals, no matter where it is. So, okay. So, I've lost my arrow here. Okay. Where did it get lost? I am going to stop sharing my screen, I think. Anyway, and I'm going to say now's time for questions. I hope I've given you an overview and some ideas as to where you might start looking at local involvement. And so with that, we'll just open it up.
Okay.
So our county redistricting process is following rules that were written by the supervisors when we passed measure.
My understanding is that the league supported the league in in Santa Barbara County supported a measure.
Yeah, measure G.
Yeah, measure G.
Yeah. So that's what we're using
That's
for
what you use.
the county supervisor districts.
Right.
And that process has been going on, and it's been quite complex, as they tried to balance all the requirements for the, communities of interest and the various other concerns. So it's been a knotty process, but there's been good public participation, I think. And
the league has
moving
been
along.
a very, very strong voice.
Oh, yeah.
From the beginning.
Now in Lompoc, I am on the school board, and we are just now talking about districts. So we have not been in districts up until this point. And now that we need to be in districts, it's going to be really interesting because our school board has been, right now, there are 3 out of the 5 of us who live in Vandenberg Village, which is a population center that is, I'm not sure how many thousand people live there, but downtown Lompoc is 40-some thousand. So,
yeah,
it's really going to be interesting. And before the 2 of us who were elected in November got on the school board, it was 5 people from Vandenberg Village.
Wow.
So,
yeah.
So times are changing.
Times are changing.
Yeah.
That was true in the city I lived next to for years. Glendale as an at-large city council. And it was a standing joke that for decades, all of the supervisors, the city council members lived north of Glen Oaks Boulevard.
Yeah.
No, but they just never seemed to elect anybody from south part of Glendale.
And Lompoc City Council went into districts in 2016, I believe it was. And so the districts were drawn protecting the incumbents, of course.
Yes.
But since then, we have a new person in District 4, which has changed the complexion entirely and the progress entirely that the city can make. So that's turned out to be a good thing.
This is Lisa, and just to add on to what Janet said, in Santa Maria, we went to districts, I want to say about 4 years ago, city-wide, and maps were drawn up, and there was a little bit of input, but then the city chose the map city council chose the map they wanted. And it was not the map that was supported by league and other entities, community entities. So is that what it comes down to, Chris? We do all this work and then like the city council chooses, or is that why the redistricting committee was developed?
Well, now, I mean, it's going to be interesting. As long as you've got incumbents drawing the lines, human nature, they're going to, I won't say everybody, but in most cases, they're going to draw lines that protect themselves. And as long as they don't violate equal population or the Federal Voting Rights Act. Now, it's going to be a little trickier for them this time because now they will have to keep privilege, keeping communities of interest and neighborhoods intact. And they can't gerrymander like partisan gerrymandering. Now, that doesn't mean, like I suppose a good attorney could say, well, incumbents aren't doing, partisan gerrymandering. They're just protecting themselves. There will be some interesting cases come out of our people arguing, well, in fact, you did do a partisan gerrymander because there were 3 Democrats or 3 Republicans out of the 5 or whatever. And by some strange coincidence, not only did those 3 districts remain Republican or Democrat, but you added another one. So there, I think there's going to be a lot of push on that after this round. But essentially, yes, I mean, it's the role of the league and the public to call it out. And it's interesting, in El Cajon, down near the border, when they went to districts a couple of years ago, they drew the districts that protect the incumbents. Funny thing was, the next election, people were angry, and 2 of the incumbents lost their seats. And they elected different kinds of people. So the San Diego County leagues are looking at El Cajon, among other things, to watch to see how the council draws the line this time. Now, if you were charter city, you could try and get an initiative through to amend the charter to create an independent citizens redistricting commission for your general law city. Now, I don't know, I'm not an attorney, so maybe you could find out if you could do that. But at the very least, the league and your partners would be monitoring it closely, giving it as much publicity as possible, calling out bad behavior, and trying to get the public to pressure the council. If I'm going to say, let's just, maybe they're going to do the best job they can. But if they're not, then you try to pressure them as much as possible.
Chris, I have one other question.
Sure.
The redistricting committee, how does that work into the process? What is their role?
Which committee are you talking about? The state?
It's a redistricting. The committees, Chris, that I'm sorry, my brain's a little mushy. That we developed a redistricting committee.
That's
and
for the county.
It was for county. Okay. Thank you, Sarah.
Can I add something? I asked Gloria that question and she said it was for city, county, and let's see what she said. City, county, state, and federal.
Well,
So
I mean, everybody has to redistrict. Everybody has to. But right now, what's happening in our county is as far as I know, the only redistricting commission that has been set up and is actually working now is the one for supervisorial districts.
Oh, so each one will have its own separate committee.
Yeah.
You'll have to do that.
Okay, I get it now.
It doesn't, I mean, that would be like saying, well, the state commission could redistricting everything. Well, it'd be impossible. But I mean, like, for instance, the commission for the independent commission, like with any, like San Diego County and LA County have new independent redistricting commissions. And so they're drawing the lines for the Board of Supervisors. they couldn't possibly tackle. I don't know where you'd get the legal right to say people who don't, I mean, you could draw for everything.
But
So
Chris,
that's the reason you gotta
what is
tackle.
the process then for the congressional districts, for example?
Well, I explained it to you. The state commission draws the lines for Congress, state legislature, and the Board of Equalization, and it's an independent commission. They have clearly ranked criteria. They do it all in public. They take massive public input. They do everything, including drawing the lines in public. They do draft maps. They get out there. The public reacts to them.
So are these meetings happening now even before we get,
They've been meeting since before the turn of the
Right.
year.
so that they'll be ready? I know that in the county, they're going ahead with the work, assuming sort of that they know how the census numbers are going to turn out, because we're not going to have them till
Okay, well, all
September
right,
at the
so this
earliest,
still
right?
still up in the air, but the
Yeah.
latest word is that just going to get really technical. Something called legacy data, which is not the actual deep technical census data, will be released to California in late August. The statewide database, which handles all that, will then take that data and the data on incarcerated persons and convert that and come out with an estimate. And then they'll get the actual public law data, the census data. It'll take them about 6 weeks turnaround to get all of the data assembled and then parceled out so that each district gets its own data. And at that point, then the people drawing the lines, your city council, for instance, will get that data, and then they will have to take that data, do a draft. You all need to give input to the community. They'll have to hold hearings. They'll have to come up with a draft. They have to allow time to comment on the draft. And then in your case, the city council will then adopt whatever the map is. But that's true also of Santa Barbara County. It's going to be tight. Now we have extended the deadline. The state Supreme Court extended the deadline for the state commission. The legislature extended the deadline for locals, but we're still getting close to some deadlines. The real problem is to get the districts done in time to allow election officials to precinct, to get ballots drawn up, to allow candidates to file, to run. If you want to run in a district, you got to know what district you're going to file for. So they've got, if it's moved, you may not be able to run in where you thought you were going to run. So they've got to get those districts drawn at every level in time to meet the election law requirements. Everybody's terribly stressed and working overtime to make it work. But it is the perfect storm.
How do we keep an eye on our city manager, because he technically runs the show in the city?
Well, I would say it's through the council. I mean, ultimately, they say a city manager, if you've got 5 people, all he needs to be able to do is count to 3 or 4 to keep his job. So it's through the city council. I mean, you can keep calling the manager, but ultimately the council has the power. And so I would say you just really keep on the council.
And Chris, what are some of the activities other leagues are doing in order to stay on top of the council or the committees?
Well, like for instance, there are a few leagues in Riverside County who are watching small cities. And so they said, one city's got its website up, it's working, they're going to do their thing. A couple of the other cities haven't been heard from yet. So these local leagues are going to the saying, when are you going to start? This is what we know you have to do. So when are you going to start? And they speak at the meetings, they send written comment, they just watch the city website. If a website does get up, is it hidden? That's been known to happen. That particular page has been known to happen. All these kinds of things. But basically the ones that where they haven't heard anything yet from the local government, it's like, when? This basic question, publicly asking the question, you have an obligation to do this. When are you going to start? What are you going to do? How are you going to do it?
Okay. Virginia, did Gloria mention anything about the start by our city council? Is Virginia still on? Yeah.
Are you on mute, Virginia?
Yes, Gloria said she was conferring with Hazel. Let's see, she's meeting with Hazel next week to talk through redistricting. And they're not going to start until after the census data comes out.
Wow.
When will it begin? And she said, yes, it's going to happen, but not until after census data is released.
Okay, that's their power to make that decision, but I'm going to go back and talk to some of the attorneys in our party. After the census data is released, they're required by law to hold the 3 public public outreach hearings where you all tell them who you are and where you want to be. And they have to draw the draft map, and then they have to have another public meeting, where they take public reaction to the map and then adjust, and before they adopt the final maps. And that's got to be in time to meet the state election codes on what the city clerk or whoever does, like, draws your precincts, draws your districts, so that candidates will know they want to file, what district they should file in. So that's going to be really, really tight.
So Chris, are you saying, so the city level is really the only level that doesn't have an independent redistricting committee looking at it or
yeah, in your case now,
in our case, but
it's all over the state. Most there is no independent commission. It's all incumbents.
Right. So what we need to do, if we want to give people in our community as much time as possible to prepare themselves to advocate for themselves, is kind of I don't know if I want to use the word push, but let the city council know that as an entity, the league really believes that the sooner the process starts, the better. In letting, at least, that the city needs to define for the community what they're going to be doing, what is a community of interest. If you want to file as a community of interest, what are the parameters going to have to be, so that all that stuff doesn't get dumped on the community. Right. And there's like a really tight 2-week timeline for people to get together and figure out what they want to advocate for.
Okay, now the council cannot define what a community of interest is.
No, but
they just whatever testimony they get, they can say, we're going to take it. You can send us an email describing it. You can send us a PDF of a map. You can speak at a public hearing with a map, that kind of thing. So the people know, but they've got to do more than just give one way to give public input.
Okay. But some way, either us or some other entity needs to communicate to our local public what a community of interest is, what it means to the redistricting process, and let people know that they are able to advocate for themselves.
Yeah, and I mean, there are some plenty, as I said, I don't want to hit you with a ton of URLs. There are plenty of really the simple material. I can send you the links. You can look at them, and you can see you know, okay, I'll take this and I'll contact our partners informally and talk. And the State League belongs to a coalition. There's over 25 organizations, statewide organizations and regional organizations that are working on this. And we could, you know, like a number of local leagues would say, could you connect us with anybody, any of your partners who happen to be in our area? And we contact them and say, do you have a local chapter or group in here? And if they do, then we can put, you know, reach to help you get in contact with them and say, okay, everybody here is worried about redistricting. We want to talk, that kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah, I think that your point, Jennifer, about getting the education out there, I think is really important. And for the city council to think that they can wait until census data comes out to do all the drawing, that is not going to work. They are going to have to play around with what they think the census is going to be. I mean, there are projections, and be ready for when the census data does come out, because it's not going to be, well, the legacy comes out the end of August, but the actual data, they're not saying till the end of September, maybe even October.
They won't, yeah, they will not get the hard data, the whole thing.
Yeah, so
from the statewide database until October. But they don't need to, you don't need to wait for the census data to come to Santa Maria in order to do public outreach.
Right.
The state commission is already doing it. A number of local groups are already doing it, local commissions. They're saying the city council could start, set up a process and say, okay, the end of May, because anytime gets started, we're going to start taking public input on neighborhoods and communities of interest. People can give you all that kind of information. And then you've got that information all packed up and, you can play around so that when they get census data from statewide database, you put that census data in, you put that with the input that you've gotten for 3 months or whatever from the city people, and you can start playing around and do visualizations of maps. As long as you don't draw a map, you can do what they call visualization, which means you can sit there and say, well, so we could do this, or we could do that, or we could do another. Here are different ways we could look at it. As long as you aren't, quote unquote, drawing a map, an official draft map of the districts for the city of Santa Maria, the council and the line drawers in public, we hope, could do visualizations and entities put them out there for the public to look at. But you could certainly take public comment on neighborhoods and communities of interest and have it ready to go when the census data arrives.
I've been watching a lot of the city council meetings, and I'm disappointed. They do not know. They are doing a lot of sneakiness, because from what I see is that they're not giving enough time for public comment. They're sliding in with a 72 hours, requirement. They are not, even if it's, I don't even think that they're even doing that, to tell you the truth.
And I think that's kind of, to Chris's presentation today, it's kind of the point that it at a certain point, it doesn't matter whether it is purposeful or whether it's accidental that the council is not posting information or getting the information out there in a timely manner so that people have time to prepare themselves for public comment, and or there are deadlines that the council has to follow for different things. And so if a lot of times it's you know, in my experience with the bureaucracy of education and other things, a lot of it comes down to, you know, not having enough foresight. And so really that's why it's important for us as a league to decide how are we going to advocate so that the redistricting process does not fall into that type of pattern where the city has not thought about it long enough because they have other priorities right this second because they know the census isn't coming out for a while. So I kind of, you know, just giving the benefit of the doubt, it usually is just that, you know, there are more pressing problems at this moment. So that's why it's important to have community input that says, hey, you guys, this is coming up and we have a real concern that if we're not leaving enough time for like real, you know, community input, that the process is going to seem like it's not transparent. It is going to seem like it's been rushed if we don't plan ahead. And
Right.
so kind of introducing the idea to the city council, if that's what we decide to do, let them know in the next, you know, whatever, 2 meetings or so, hey, why don't you guys start taking, you know, decide how you're going to take community input on the redistricting process and, you know, put out a way that people can start giving input, even if it's a passive input process where they set up a website with a link that describes, you know, what a community or neighborhood of interest is. And if you feel like you're part of one, this is how you would advocate for yourself at the redistricting city council level in our city elections.
That's what I'm thinking is if we just say something in public about, you know, or to the council, that we to put something out there that the public has their memories jogged and they can start thinking about this process because and letting them know that because once it happens and the census data comes out, it will go quickly. So we want people to start thinking about what they want and what, you know, and that the city council needs to facilitate that somehow.
I like that idea, Karen. I was thinking that maybe the league could start a weekly column in the Santa Maria Times. And I think there's a toolkit the league has, isn't there, Chris?
Yes, there is.
So we could have an article a week on and take it right straight from the toolkit on the things that Chris's slides covered. Maybe it could go in a Spanish publication too. I don't know what that would be, but
If you just wanted some basic Spanish, I mean, we could talk to our partners and see if they have some, because they're got to do it for their, I mean, I don't know what languages beyond Spanish it would be in your community, but some of the information is in a number of different languages. So, but at a minimum, we could ask our partners, could you just give us some basic FAQs in Spanish?
Yeah.
Are there other languages that?
Ms. Teco.
Have Miss Teco.
Well, and there's Filipino, there's quite a Filipino group.
Okay, well, I'll have to check with the Asians Advancing Justice, because Tagalog is one of the languages that I know they've got some information in. So I could certainly, you send me a list. And because we work with Asians Advancing Justice and the Asian Law Caucus very closely. It's their attorneys there in the Asian Law Caucus that have been really, really leading the point stuff on local redistricting law.
I bet that CAUSE has stuff on it.
Language list.
Well, but redistricting information too, I think.
Oh,
In Spanish already, maybe, I don't know.
Are they involved?
Reach out to
at the
Rebecca
county level?
Garcia. I'm sorry?
Are they involved? Are they commenting, observing at the county commission?
Yes, I'm sure they are, yeah.
Well, then maybe they have some, but I'll check with Naleo and to see. If
That
they-
would be great.
And Churla and, those groups, that's really just basic stuff.
Okay, are there other questions for Chris? This has been wonderful for an overview, and I think the ideas we're getting can be very effective. I think going forward, we will plan out starting this week how we want to contact the council and how we want to communicate with the community and get that going, as Virginia pointed out, on a regular basis. Is there any last comments from anyone? And Janet, it was wonderful to have you with us. Your insights always appreciated as well.
Thank you. It's lovely to be here and see everybody and
Yeah.
have all this information from Chris.
Yeah.
We all.
And you know, as you go forward, if you have questions, just, you know, my email.
Okay.
That's part of my role. Yeah, Helen and I, we're definitely spending an enormous amount of time at the state level. But the other role is that we are, because the league's goal, the state league's goal here is at this round is local redistricting. It's the next step. And so part of a good chunk of what we're supposed to be doing is helping local leagues decide what it is they want to do and the best way to do it.
Chris, are there going to be workshops on redistricting at the state convention?
Yes, but okay, but they will be focused on, I'll tell you what it is, because it's all going to be virtual. We're going to have an interview with the two women who are the attorneys from Asian Law Caucus, specifically talking about the rules, what you can and can't do for local redistricting. And that'll be like an interview, and that'll just be recorded so that anybody can go in and watch it. But then we're going to have a panel with some of our partners to say, how do you organize at the local level with different groups? One of them is going to be from the Conservation League, because the league is really pushing now environmental and environmental justice communities of issue. That, I mean, it's coming up now. We're going to have somebody from the Black Census and I mean, people who are actually do on the ground local regional organizing to give their perspectives on, you know, how you can reach out and form coalitions and really pull as many people in to be as effective as possible.
I want to put a plug in too, Sarah. That's a really good thing to bring up, the convention. When Lisa and I went to the Sacramento convention, the league was so forward thinking. They were already talking about redistricting. I went to one of the meetings, and they were talking about creating commissions that had teeth so that the city council couldn't shoot down their recommendations. They would have to adopt the independent commission's final report on what the correct maps would be. And I tried to talk to Cause about that. How many years ago, Lisa? That was so many years ago. And they weren't prepared to address that issue. It had to be on the ballot. They wanted it to be on the ballot to vote that these commissions would have power.
But yeah, you have to, you don't get to the point where you understand that it's who the real power is in writing the ballot measure. Because the way it's worded determines whether it's truly independent and workable or not. That's why you want to be in on the ground floor of any kind of, you know, whether it's a state ballot measure or a county or a local, you want to be there in the room right at the start.
Yeah, that's what's so great about being part of the league and being able to go to those conferences and their Zoom. And I wish all of our members could go because they're just so great.
Well, they can. Of course, it's going to be virtual this time. And so sort of like the national convention, where we pioneered so much, you know, we had all of the caucuses and the workshops on Zoom, and the giant light bulb went on over the head of the entire organization. We have to do this from now on. There's no way we go back to that before. I mean, instead of getting 30 people in a room, some of those national caucuses had 400 people.
Yeah.
You know, we're just, you know, yes, it's good to get, we will be happy to get back to in-person conventions when it's okay, but we will be staying at every level, you know, national level, state level. We're going to be staying with these virtual caucuses and workshops for the like 2 to 3 weeks before, because you got it, you can record it, people can, it's there forever. I mean, I know that all of the recordings of the National Convention caucuses and workshops people are still using them.
Yeah.
So, you know, this year it'll be virtual. We'll hope that in 2 years we can get back to in person, because nothing does quite replace the networking of people.
True. Okay, well,
Okay.
on that note, yeah. Chris,
Okay.
again, thank you.
That's what my job is, literally, so to speak.
Thank you.
Well, you do it very well.
To help you.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, you know,
Thank
just
you so
whatever you
much.
need, send me an email. Okay.
Thank
Okay,
you. Thank you,
fine.
Chris.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye-bye. Thank you, everyone.
All right.
All right.
I'm gonna get a hold of everybody this week. We've got to send out a convention invite and let everybody know we're going to offer to pay was it $10 for
25.
registration?
I think it was 25.
25.
And
I
there's,
thought it-
and if
I
you
thought it was 25 for a delegate and 10 for a non-delegate.
I thought it was 75 for a delegate.
Oh, it is, okay.
I don't
So
know. That's what I heard. I don't know.
We'll have to look up that information. And if it's 25 and people want to go, do we want to cover that for them?
Well,
They
Sarah,
can pay it.
Sarah knows.
I got a scholarship.
Okay. Well, a lot of folks won't know how
Right.
how to follow that
I-
process.
I vote for covering it. If people want to go, we'll cover it.
I
Yay,
think so.
Karen. Yay, Karen.
Yeah.
All right.
And
Aye.
and we can try the scholarship. If we want to pay ourselves, that's fine. But how about if the motion says if unable to pay or get a scholarship, our league will pay the $25 registration fee. And I'll write
Okay.
something up and get it to Karen to send out.
Well, I'm writing it now. I'm taking
Oh.
minutes of this whole thing.
Oh, okay. Perfect.
The other thing that I think we need to do is address a quick, knock together a letter to put to a city council.
Oh,
saying
yeah.
something.
That's the other thing this week we
I
need to
mean,
do.
yeah.
And start attending the city council and talking during the public comment. And maybe as Jen says, and she's always good at this, educating people. They may not know themselves. It'd be kind of cool to even have Chris present to the city council, but I don't think
Yeah,
they'd go
well, and
that far.
that was what I was thinking, is probably a lot of people in town don't know
Oh,
that they might be a
absolutely.
community or neighborhood of interest. And
Mhm.
so, and the same thing's going to be true for like the high school district, for the school district, is making sure that people know about that as well. So that might be something our future leaders, I don't know if they're into any of that at all, but they're at least connected to the school, and they
Yeah,
might be.
I can check with Angel and see what they're planning in that area.
Okay.
Do you guys already have districts in your school board?
I don't think the high school district does. I don't know if the elementary school does or not.
Well, high school's gonna go.
Well, they all have
Everybody
to go.
has to.
Everybody has to go, but I just don't know if the elementary school district might be ahead of us.
I don't think so, but
Okay.
it's going to be
So-
interesting.
Yeah, so this week we need to concentrate on how we want to contact and educate the city council, and then start sending some letters and maybe look at the column that Virginia alluded to, a weekly information out to the public on education as well. So do we want to start with that and see how it goes and move forward from that point?
Well, who's going to write
Anything
the
else?
letter to the city council? Lisa, are you going to write it?
Yeah, I will write the letter to the city council,
I can
I'll
check
write
with
it.
Tom. Okay.
and I'll send it to everybody to look at before we send it.
I can look in the toolkit and see if there's something in there that could be maybe starting in June, July, August? When do we, because we don't have enough for a weekly column forever.
Yeah,
When-
no,
When is this gonna run, and when
yeah.
do we start
So
and so forth?
well, we'll have to look at that piece.
I'm putting it not just in the Santa Maria Times, maybe the Santa Maria Sun.
Yeah,
Okay.
And the San Ynez paper too.
Is San Ynez owned by the same company,
I
Janet?
don't know. The Sun is. I'm not sure. I don't know.
The Lompoc Record and Santa Maria Times are together owned by one, right?
Yes.
And
And they
Yeah.
do own the Sun, I believe.
no,
No, they don't own
No.
the Sun.
Okay.
the Sun and the New Times are the ones that are combined.
okay.
Sun and the New Times.
Mhm.
And then there is a publication in the Valley, but I'm not sure.
And that's part of the Record and Santa Maria Times.
Is it okay?
And boy, have they changed their obituaries. They've gone to the legacy arrangement.
Okay, so anything else to bring up today?
On the letter writing, it seems like if you put out something now, just a general outline kind of thing of this is what's going to be happening, and it wouldn't have to be something that you've did every week.
Right, it's kind of an awareness. We need
Yeah.
to look for this, get it started. This is the expectation of the city council going forward. Yeah,
Yeah.
that kind of a thing. Yeah.
So a letter to the city council, could that also be used as a letter to the editor?
We can tweak it for a letter to the editor, and instead of city council, it can be a focus to the community.
Okay, that sounds like a
That's
good
what
way to
that's what
go.
I'm thinking. Yeah,
Great, okay.
A good start, yeah.
yeah. We'll get there.
Thank you guys for hanging in there and doing all
Thank
this.
you.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right.
Bye.
Everybody have
Bye-bye.
a great day.
You
All right,
too.
see you
Bye.
later.
I'll send you
Okay,
notes.
bye.
Bye.
Yeah.